You're listening to the Rent Roll Radio Show with Sterling Chapman.
Hey, Rent Roll Radio listeners, welcome back to the show. As always, I'm your host, Sterling Chapman. Today, we are joined with John Todderud from Seattle, Washington. I met John at the Best Ever Conference last week in Denver, Colorado, where we were both freezing to death and rubbing elbows with a bunch of other investors. John, thank you so much for joining us and hopping on my show. We're excited to have you.
Thank you, Sterling. Thank you for letting me join you.
John, can you give our listeners a brief background, where you came from, how you got into real estate, what you're doing today?
Yeah, sure. My background is in technology. I spent my whole career in software and information technology. I developed software for a while, had my own company for a number of years, producing and selling software, and then became a technology consultant for the last number of years, and about 15 years or so in that field, and was able to leverage those skills to begin buying real estate about 11 years ago. I started with smaller properties. I kind of went down a path that everybody seems to go through, was where I wasn't pleased with how investments were performing in the public markets and wanted more control, and thought this was something that I could do. And so I bought some smaller properties soon after the 2008 crisis. It's about 2010. I was looking seriously into the markets and bought a 3-unit and 4-unit and got good deals on them because they were short sales. I owned them and managed them. They were not very far from my home, and was able to go down and do the repairs on these properties and find tenants and increase rents, and little by little just improve the standards of the units, made them nicer places to live for these tenants, and it proved worthwhile. I grew equity in the properties and sold them and bought progressively bigger properties, and after just a few years or so, and I'm still owning these properties. And I did partner on one earlier on, and bought the bigger properties and owned them. And it was around at that time, at about 5 or 6 years ago, that I started learning about syndicating and realizing the opportunities of joining other people's funds together, and where they're looking for opportunities like this as well, real estate investments, and pooling funds and syndicating for buying larger properties, and networked a lot in my area and joined other networking conferences in other places, and little by little just improved my experience in education, got my broker's license, and although I don't work as a broker, I just wanted to educate myself, and did a first syndication with partners about 5 years ago, and owned it and managed it. We went full cycle, did very well for our investors, and have been looking for property and buying property since then. I wish that I could say I bought dozens and dozens of properties. That was really not the case. It's been a difficult market. Every year in the market, it seems like things can't continue going up anymore. I better be careful. But as we all know, it has, and that's still the case today. It can't keep going up all the time, year after year. So we're extremely careful and cautious, and need to know that we're taking care of properties in case of a downturn. And that's always been my perspective. And so I grew from that first syndication and syndicated again last year. A group of us bought a property in Tulsa, Oklahoma that was not stable. It was a low occupancy property, and we knew it going in and knew what our challenge was: renovating and leasing up. And we've been doing that since then. One of the other properties that I owned on my own in my state of Washington, I'd owned it for several years and had a lot of equity built up, and was able to find a buyer and sell it toward the end of last year and do a 1031 exchange. And so I found another property, a replacement property, and sold the previous one, put the new one under contract, and recently closed it just a few weeks ago. And
awesome.
So now I'm operating that. And back looking for more properties to syndicate, larger properties at this point. My last syndication was a 96 unit, and this one that I just bought is in Kansas City, is a 40 unit, but we'll be looking at 150 unit properties.
Awesome. Lots going on there. I've got tons of questions.
Yeah.
I guess going to the beginning of the story.
Sure.
Why do we have so many people coming out of tech going into real estate? I hear that story over and over again. And knowing nothing about tech, I've always heard that's the greenest pastures where you can get rich overnight. So what is it that you think is causing so many folks from your industry to migrate to real estate investing?
Yeah, good question. I can speak to that because I live in kind of a tech center, and I live in the greater Seattle area. And in Seattle, like Silicon Valley and Boston, a lot of other areas around the U.S. are extremely strong in technology. A lot of the biggest companies have large offices, if not headquarters here, and there's a lot of tech people around. So there's several reasons. One is that the salaries are high, of course, and if you're good at technology, then you're worth a lot of money. You can make a decent salary. A lot of these people are fairly young, and they don't know necessarily how to translate that into building wealth, and so they look for things like outside of the stock market. A lot of them are into crypto, and a lot of them are into real estate, and they're looking for ways of sheltering it's kind of a high tax bracket. The second reason is because there is a lot of a logistical skill, technology skill that becomes super valuable in the world of real estate. Being able to look at the finances. If you're good at coding, you're probably good at math and other number things, and so that translates well into finances. And you can look at a financial profile of a property, and you can learn how to determine if it's a good opportunity to invest in or not. A lot of technology people, it's sort of a cliche that they're not really people, that they don't interact, and that's clearly not true. I have a lot of technology friends that are very outgoing and personable, and they want to meet and they network well, and so there's a good opportunity for them, and they do well because they've sort of qualified themselves as gotten a good education and in a position to invest their own capital and maybe bring in other people because they know other people in the technology market. So, it is connected.
Especially, I find, and this is my completely uneducated opinion on the subject, but especially in the syndication space where you're raising capital and you're mass marketing and creating all these systems and processes where you manage from afar and you raise capital from afar and you try and expand your footprint. It seems every day I'm tripping over a different system or software that I don't know how to use and reaching out to some tech savvy friend of mine. So I can only imagine that a tech background would not have slowed me down a bit in this process over the years. I was 10 minutes before this call cussing at the computer going, man, I wish I could get blah, blah, blah on the phone. He's a lot savvier at this kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, it also relates to a lot of other fields as well. There's hardly a professional field out there that does not require some level of technical skills. And maybe you didn't come out of college with them, but you sure developed them as you went along, and you got good at using systems and spreadsheets, and you realize the benefits, and you've got that skill, and that's absolutely transferable as well. People in medical professions and other engineering fields, these are things that they can learn, and they see the benefits of them. And it's a transferable skill for sure.
Awesome. So moving on down the line, tell me about your first smaller multifamily properties. Can you walk me through how much you paid for them, how much they rented for, how much you sold them for? And you said you did the work yourself. You physically went in and did the work, or you hired people to rent?
Well, that was a learning process also. I'll tell you at the outset, what I fix usually doesn't stay fixed, and so I learned that. I didn't think that initially. I've done my own home repairs, and I enjoy that kind of work. It's kind of fun. I've done electrical, plumbing, carpentry on houses that I own. And so I think, oh, yeah, I'm qualified, but I was definitely not. I was not the right person to do that. So I found properties that were short sales, as I mentioned. And the first one was a 3-unit property, and I think it was $240,000 or so. And so I had enough money to put down as a down payment. And then I mean, the first 2 were actually short sales. And the thing I would mention is that both of them, their owners, prior to the '08 collapse, had more loans outstanding than these properties were worth, considerably more. And so the banks really took a substantial hit. Well, the owners did too. And so they were good opportunities. But in 2009, 2010, who knew they were good opportunities? All we knew was that we're in a crisis. And are we bottoming out? Are we starting to recover? Or is it going to get even worse in the future? Nobody knew that. I mean, you just kind of have to take your chances and think that it probably is not going to get much worse. So I bought that one and had equity in it. And my process was it was about half an hour away, and I'd take a call from a tenant that maybe there was an issue on the property, and I'd sometimes have to leave my day job, but often it was something I could do in the evening or the next weekend, depending on the severity of the problem. And I did that for a while, and then realized, I need a handyman, or I need to know a plumber, I need to know an electrician, or they're going to move out, and I need to do a turn. And so, what's the condition of the unit? Does it need paint? Does it need any kind of other repairs, things like that? And I found people. You just kind of look around and you go on Craigslist or whatever your resources are, and you find people to do this work. And that's how I grew managing the properties and got myself out of the day-to-day reacting to a unit, but not very far. It was still ultimately my responsibility, and I had to take the calls and do a lot of that work.
Nobody cares like you're gonna.
Yeah, no, for sure. About 3 years into it, I realized the rents were up, and I was learning how to. Something I did not know how to do when I initially bought them was how to value a property like that. I was buying them thinking that, they're all cheap now because we just came out of a recession, which is generally the case, but otherwise I didn't really know. And so I was learning how to value a property through that time period, and could see 3 years later that, I've got a more valuable property now. And I've got whatever equity I put in, it's more than doubled, two and a half times or so in just 3 years. And I was pretty happy about it and wanted to leverage that equity in another property. I mean, this is something that a lot of people they'll refinance on a property, and which makes a lot of sense. For me, I chose just to sell it and take the full amount of equity and put it in another property because I didn't see that there was a lot more upside potential in this property either. And so I bought larger properties. I sold the 3-unit and bought an 11-unit, and I had also bought a 4-unit at pretty much the same time, and did the same kinds of things to it, and sold it about 3 years later and bought a 15-unit. And so there was a lot of equity, like enough equity to buy these larger properties. And they were in another part of my state, another part of Washington, where I wasn't able to drive to it. I had to have a professional property manager. They were not on site or anything. It's far too small to get an on-site person, but they're nearby. And they took care of it. It was a huge burden off of my shoulders, and learned that. And really, it was the course of owning these properties that you realize I could own anywhere in the U.S. I don't have to own someplace that I can drive to in 2 hours. You've got a property manager. You're working with them on the phone. Sometimes you're driving to the property, but you don't have to all that often. And so that kind of opened up a whole new world for me, looking at other parts of the country that maybe are better opportunities.
No, absolutely. So walk me through the 1031 exchange you just did. We talked to a lot of people about 1031 theory, but we don't often have people detail what the experience was like.
Sure. Yeah. I had actually been through a 1031 on this same property previously. Um, so I had a little bit of experience, and I had owned this one property. It was a 15 unit property and owned it for a number of years. And there was a lot of equity in it. And I did not want to have to pay the capital gains tax. I wanted to try to do a tax exchange, a 1031 exchange, if I possibly could. And I I knew that the demand for buying this property was pretty high, but I wasn't really sure. And so I started calling around brokers in the area and saying, "Hey, I'm thinking of selling my property, and wanted to talk with you, see if you're qualified to list it for me." And I talked to several of these brokers, and this is very early in the process, really before I had my replacement property. So, a brief overview of a 1031 exchange. The general rules are, and confirm this by doing your own Google searches and talking to your own lawyer and accountant. But you after you close of the sale of your property, you have 45 days to identify up to 3 possible replacement properties. And then you have 6 months to close on the purchase of one of those properties. If for some reason you don't do that, then the whole 1031 is off. You're going to pay taxes on your gains. And so I knew I had a short window to identify a replacement property, and that was really my priority. And I didn't I didn't want to get into the sale of my current property too soon before I really had an idea of where I wanted to buy. And so I was looking around different markets for my replacement property, and I found a few, but I wasn't set on one yet. But anyway, after I talked to the brokers, one broker presented me an unsolicited offer, and it was actually for what I was looking for. And I initially agreed to the price on that, and I thought I should probably just take this, and because it saves me a lot of hassle of listing it, and I probably won't get too much more for it. And we started moving down the road. It turned out that was not the right buyer for my property, and we ended the contract, or we didn't have under contract yet, but we ended the discussions. But nevertheless, I have this confidence now that the property will sell. I was talking to other people and did find another buyer without listing it again for the same price. And so got it under contract and moved it down the road towards selling that property. And then I was in a scramble to find the replacement property. And I put in the contract for selling my property that I need 90 days to be able to sell it. I don't want to close any sooner than 90 days. And that's, typically a buyer is asking for a lot of time. In this case, it was the seller that's asking for it. And because I needed time, I didn't want to take the chance of not having a property. And it turned out I found the replacement property fairly early on, and negotiated a price, got it under contract, and then started moving through the purchase of that. And the more that I looked at it, the more I saw it, the more I liked it. And so that actually ended up going pretty smoothly. The sale of my other property went pretty well for the most part. Also, I actually started thinking that, wow, I wish I hadn't asked for 90 days. I kind of would have liked to have closed it sooner, but it went fine. There are a few little hiccups along the line, but basically, all in all, it went fine. And finding the replacement property, again, it's just me. I don't have partners, and I don't have a private placement memorandum or any of the baggage that a syndication has to come with. But nevertheless, there were a few little issues along the line with buying the replacement property, and it did go through to completion. There were some delays in it, but all in all, it went through to completion fairly successfully. I considered myself fortunate to have found that property. And I think that's the big challenge that a lot of people, or hurdle a lot of people have in 1031s, is like, oh my gosh, what am I going to buy?
It's a chicken or the egg situation. It's like, well, I don't want to list it until I got this other one, but if I wait, yes, I might not be able to sell it quick enough. And it's certainly in theory is an anxious process.
Yeah. And for people thinking about it, a cost segregation and bonus depreciation is another good option. If you have a property with a lot of equity in it, you sell it, you've got a big capital gains tax due, go out, put that money into another property and get a cost segregation study done. And chances are it will allow you to deduct a high percentage of your investment and
that's
not have to pay the tax.
I'm selling a bunch of single family houses this year, and and my CPA was like, well, I mean, you're going to have a huge tax liability there. I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm going to dump it all into apartment buildings.
Yeah.
I mean, yes. I'm either going to dump it into our syndications or I'll dump it into somebody else's if we don't have enough deal flow. But I'm going to take that cost seg, that bonus depreciation to offset it all. I'm not paying all that taxes.
No, there are options that are available. You have to be aggressive about it and educate yourself. But you've got a property, and there are a lot of other properties available and out there for sale. Not all of them are suitable, and a lot of people hear that, as soon as that seller finds out I'm doing a 1031 for buying his property, he's going to take me to the cleaners. He's going to just impose a lot of other requirements on me and be difficult to negotiate. And that's not always the case. I mean, it can be the case a lot of times, but I wouldn't let that deter you or intimidate somebody. Just do the deal and hang tight, and maybe have other options that you can pursue if your targeted property doesn't work for some reason.
Yep. Tell us about the syndication, the first one you did.
It was
96 units.
Well, the first one we did was a 32 unit property in South Carolina, upstate South Carolina. And the second one we did was 96 units in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And and so I think that's the one you're asking about. Is it?
Yep.
The Tulsa one. Yes, it actually looked real nice from the outside, and the prior owner had done a lot of work on it already and was planning on finishing all the renovations and leasing it up. And I heard about it, and he was amenable to selling it off before he was finished his work. The outside looked nice, very good curb appeal, and most of the units were already renovated. There were a few left. He had replaced a lot of the HVAC and PTAX and the mini splits, and there was a lot of new resurfacing of countertops and new carpet, replaced it with LVP in a lot of cases. Just a lot of them, these units look nice. They just needed to be leased up. It was in a decent area of Tulsa, a growing area near a large medical facility with a lot of people coming in for that and some other types of jobs. Just definitely a growing area. And we found professional property. Well, not to get ahead of myself, but I liked it and got it under contract. And through the contract period, the owner continued to lease it up and finished some renovations and leased it up. By the time we closed, it was a little bit higher of occupancy. It was probably in the low to mid 50s or so of occupancy. And since then, we have done work on all the units that still needed to be renovated. We're not trying to over renovate them, but we knew there was going to be a cost for that, and we had a loan structure to make this amenable for us. And we have been doing that since then. Our property manager has been finding new tenants for the property and advertising in a number of ways. It's interesting. We connected with the federal programs for placing Afghan refugees, and there's a lot of them that have come into the U.S. since the summertime, and they need places to live, and very good tenants. We've had some experiences with them, and good people, hard workers, very family oriented, and they take care of things. Had good experiences so far. The first few months of operating with them, and so we're glad to have been of service in this area, and we continue to progress finding new tenants. The challenges, of course, have been with contractors. Contractors are anywhere are super hard to find, and so one of the challenges in the property, or the issues that we knew about right away, were they had a lot of these old Federal Pacific stab lock breakers, the breaker panels that were put in the 60s and 70s and then prohibited because they were fire hazards, and insurance companies.
We've had to replace plenty.
Yes. And so we found an insurance company that would still insure us. Their insurance in the property was going to be higher. We knew that from the outset. And we committed to them that'll be our first and highest priority project, and it has been. And they're all replaced except one now, and that should be replaced next week. And so we got to work just putting new replacement breaker panels in, and that's a challenge also because electricians are busy. They're all the skillful people are productively utilized these days.
Yeah, and so it's a weird world we're living in today, where there's plenty of money, but there's no deals and there's no workers.
Yes, yeah, particularly the skilled workers, and it could be worse. It could be that we're not in a recession yet, thankfully, knock on wood, and hopefully we're not heading there, but who knows? But it all bodes well for multifamily, and that's the reason we're talking. Is there's great opportunities still for a number of years into the future, and we're out looking for them. They're hard to compete for. They're not just deals falling off trees. You've got to really dig hard, and that's what'll produce this. But yes, people are going to need places to live. They want nicer homes. They want nicer amenities, and that's what we look for: is opportunities to provide these services and improve the conditions for tenants in growing areas.
Awesome. John, I want to hop over to our radio round real quick.
Okay.
There's 3 quick questions. The first one is, what's your favorite book?
There is a book that came out not too long ago, not this year, maybe 3 or 4, gosh, I can't remember, 3 or 4 years ago. It's called Living with a Seal. And
oh yeah, that's David Goggins.
David Goggins, yes.
Did Isler write it about living with David Goggins?
Yes, correct. Yeah, and his wife, of course, is Sarah Blakely from the Spanx company. There's you're a very wealthy couple, and so they had space in their Manhattan apartment or wherever, and he met this. It's a story about how your mindset, your focused mindset, can make dramatic changes in not only your body, but also your everything else about your mind and your life. And a phenomenal story about this. And David Goggins is a tremendously successful guy as a Navy SEAL, and
sure. And as an ultra marathon runner and several other insane physical feats.
It was super inspiring for me.
The fittest man on the planet or something. He did like 1,000 pull-ups in a row.
But not always. He had a period where he's 150 pounds overweight, he said.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
Well, that's great. That's a great book, and great characters. What's your favorite quote?
It's a quote that I actually have on my wall as a daily reminder. It says, "Everything you want is on the other side of fear," and
Yep.
it kind of I'm not even sure who said it. I should probably give credit to a person, but I don't recall. It just resonated so much for me. It's like I can't do this because
Sounds like Zig.
yeah, it could be. And it could have been around for a while, but it just hit home for me.
Awesome. That's a good one. And what's your favorite thing to do outside of work?
I like to travel and take pictures. I do a fair amount of outdoor photography. I have an Instagram page or site where I post my outdoor photography, John Todderud Outdoors on Instagram, my little plug. But yeah, it's travel photography and wildlife and anything outdoors I like to photograph. I mean, I do a number of other activities and stay pretty active with workouts and running and yeah,
That's
just need to keep active and keep my mind active outside of work.
awesome. Love it. I love it. John, thank you so much for joining us today. Can you tell our listeners how they can get a hold of you, how they can invest with you, how they can mastermind with you or learn from you?
Great. Thank you, Sterling. Really appreciate it. It's great to catch up with you again. Since we met not too long ago in Denver, and I can be reached, of course, through LinkedIn, John Todderud, Todderud, and also through either Facebook, my company, Cardinal Oak Investments, John Todderud, Cardinal Oak Investments, and of course, LinkedIn and at John Todderud, I'm sorry, and my email, John, JOHN at Cardinal Oak, CARDINALOAK.com.
Awesome. John, thank you so much for joining us. I really enjoyed catching up with you again, and I definitely look forward to keeping up with you on your journey.
Thanks very much, Sterling. Likewise.
Thanks for tuning in to the Rent Roll Radio Show brought to you by Crestworth Capital. We hope you enjoyed the show, and if you did, please hit the subscribe button and leave us a rating and review. You can also visit us at crestworthcapital.com or rentrollradio.com, or follow us on Facebook at Rentroll Radio or at Crestworth Capital. If you would like to reach us, feel free to shoot us an email at info@rentrollradio.com or sterling@crestworthcapital.com. We hope you come back next week to join us on some more of our journey. Until then, happy investing.